Hello, everybody, and welcome to our eBay broadcast. So, as I was just explaining off the recording a second ago to those of you guys who are here live, um, selling electronics is something that comes up a lot. In fact, it's funny. A lot of times with my newer clients, I'll say, "Hey, so you tell me what you want to sell on eBay if you could choose anything." And my guess is probably half of you would say, "I want to sell some type of electronics." Well, but let's define electronics real quick. What are we talking about? If I say electronics, what springs to mind for you guys? What kind of products are classified under electronics? Think Best Buy, right? What's on the shelves of Best Buy? How about TVs? Yeah, how about anything from Apple, right? Apple products or Mac. hmm Headphones, sure. Yeah, gaming stuff, gaming systems, games, right? Consoles. I guess that's the same thing as systems. Very popular, right? How about computers? How about tablets? How about cell phones? How about printers? How about, right? Can we just go on and on and on and on? I think that's plenty. You guys get the point. You picture Best Buy in your mind, and that's anything electronics, right? Well, how many of you guys here sell a lot of electronics on eBay? I'm not going to actually poll you. Sometimes I'll run one of these polls in these webinars. I'm not going to do that right now. Just in the chat window, and I know if you're watching this recorded, you can't see this, but in the chat, how many of you guys are actually selling electronics? Danielle says nope. Too risky. Elaborate on that, Danielle. Why too risky? Jeff says no. Now, is this no because you've tried and it hasn't worked, or is it no because you haven't tried and you're not going to try? Haven't tried, Jeff. Okay, fair enough. Probably because I told you not to, honestly. I mean, I'm pretty biased with you guys that are newer. I'll usually tell you no. Too expensive, Kathy says. Yeah, that's fair. Too much competition from I agree with Amy. We're going to talk about that. Shannon, you haven't tried. Let's address it this way, okay? Why sell it? Or let's say why sell them, okay? For those of you guys who feel inclined to want to sell electronics, what's the allure there? What's the pull? Why do you feel like you want to sell them? Why, in other words, why would it be a good thing to sell? Just make a little list. Yeah, money in it, right? Just going to put dollar signs. I think, and we think money out of electronics because there's a lot of demand, right? I'm going to say a lot of demand. A tremendous amount of demand, right? I mean, look at the list of things that we put up here. You think people bought a lot of this stuff over the holidays? Of course they did, right? I mean, you could probably ask any family in America, and they would tell you at least one or more of these items here listed were probably on theirs or their kids' wish lists for Christmas. Okay, electronics has a tremendous amount of demand and will continue to be that way. So yes, that's something kind of exciting to us because we think, my goodness, if we could get a good supplier, we could sell the crap out of some of this stuff, right? I know a lot of you kind of like it because you like them. It's true, isn't it? Don't we kind of like to sell what we like or what we use? I do. Now, I haven't. My business hasn't really been built on the model of if you like it, then sell it. I've sold lots of things that I don't necessarily like. I've sold a lot of jewelry over the years, and I've never ever worn a piece of jewelry outside of my wedding ring, ever. Right? So, do you have to love what you sell? No, but I can tell you, it does make it a little more fun. If you're big into computers or you love gaming, right? Maybe you're a tech person and you really just enjoy the latest and greatest smartphone. You're probably going to be slightly inclined to sell those things, which is in part the reason why I get a lot of you who want to sell them right out the gate. So I mean, I would say those are probably the three main reasons, right? Why most people want to sell stuff like that. Let me get to why I'm going to push you away from selling electronics. So I'm going to say why not sell them with a little frowny face, right? This is where I break the bad news to you. I've never done extremely well selling electronics. Okay, so maybe I'm a little jaded. I've bought electronics in bulk before and sold them. I've bought refurbished electronics and sold them. I've found highly discounted gaming systems and sold them. I've sold a lot of those little Roku streaming devices and sold them. I've sold gaming keyboards. Um, I've actually sold a lot, but I've never really made a ton of money with it. Oh, and I've sold a lot of cell phones over the years. I used to be one of those people that would get the latest and greatest cell phone, um, specifically an Apple product, and I would buy it early and then resell it on eBay, and you could sell it for just tremendous profit if you did that. So I did that a few times. I've sold iPhones for over $1,000 before when they were the latest model and everybody wanted them. But I've never been able to do it on a sustainable level. And I'm going to share with you some of the reasons why that's been the case, at least for me. And look, I know there's a lot of people that sell and make money off of electronics. You just have to log into eBay and you can see people making money on it. I haven't. I'm not going to pretend that I'm good at everything when I'm not, right? That's just an area that I haven't been really great at. But I'll explain why. Maybe I feel like I haven't done real well there, and tell you why I don't think you'll do as well there, and try to push you off onto something a little different. Number one, um, this should be obvious, right? It's very competitive. Okay, so anything that has a lot of demand is going to inherently have a lot of competition, or the competition is going to follow that demand shortly after that demand's created. Now, I don't necessarily shy away from competition, but when we're talking about competition, we're talking about one of the busiest markets in the entire world if you're selling computers, cell phones, tablets, so on and so forth. I compare it a little bit like, imagine yourself, you've never played, or this is even a better example. Let's say you want to get into running, and you decide as part of your New Year's resolution this year, you're going to run a marathon. But you've never run more than a mile in your entire life. Do you sign up for the marathon that's happening in 4 weeks and try to run it? I guess you could. Would you do well? Probably not, right? Even if you really wanted to and you had the best trainer in the world, could you do well and run it? Maybe, but it would still be extremely difficult, wouldn't it? I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if you're just starting to sell online for the first time and this is all brand new to you, why would you all of a sudden decide to compete in one of the most difficult, busiest marketplaces there is in electronics? Yeah, I know there's a lot of upside, but you're also putting yourself in a position where you're competing against a lot of people. So I think for those reasons, I would be very careful about it. Number one, it's very competitive. Number two, let's talk about suppliers for just a minute. Think about electronics and how, and I guess I'm going to just list this already. I'm going to call this brand driven. Okay, people who buy electronics usually buy a brand that they like, right? There are generic brands in electronics that sell, but they sell at a high discount, and they don't have nearly the market because people like to buy their choice brand, right? Apple or Dell or Microsoft, or maybe you like Android, or maybe it's Sony, maybe that's your product, or HP, or whatever it is. Vizio, right? Samsung. Anyway, you get the point. Bottom line is, if it's brand driven, these large brands, they actually don't need distribution. Okay, I want you to think about Apple for just a minute, for just a second. Apple doesn't need distribution. They don't need people like us to resell their stuff to get their stuff out onto the market. Apple's too big. They manufacture their own stuff. They have their own stores, right? There are Apple stores out there that handle distribution. A lot of people buy Apple directly from Apple on the internet. Apple products are sold in other places like Best Buy, but they're usually major retailers. If Apple already sells all of its stuff to through major distribution, how are you going to get Apple products at a wholesale price? I can tell you right now, Apple does not wholesale drop ship, nor does Samsung, nor does Microsoft, nor does Vizio. There aren't wholesale options there, unless, so that's not 100% true, unless you have your own physical store that does a certain amount of volume, and then in which case maybe you can strike a deal with Vizio and carry some of their televisions at a discounted wholesale price. But I'm telling you, as a new business on the internet trying to drop ship, you are going to really struggle to find decent suppliers. And because it's brand driven, and then also I want to go to number 4, it's also price driven, meaning it's very easy to compare apples to apples. There was a webinar I did a little while back. Some of you guys had seen it, but I talked about this issue. I'm going to look at baby toys for just a second here, just to illustrate this point. I should have prepared this a little bit better, but I wanted to bring up a toy and just quiz you guys to see how much you thought it would be worth. But you can obviously see the price, so this game's not going to be as fun. But I've done this before with my clients where I've showed them a picture of a product like this, and I said, hey, tell me how much that costs. How much could you buy that for? And it's crazy the variation I get. Some clients are like, oh, that's probably like $10. And then others are like, oh, no, that's probably more like, 45, 50, $55, $100, right? The spread is large. If I showed you a picture of the latest iPad, that guessing game of people saying, hey, it's maybe this or maybe that, narrows dramatically, because it's very easy to go out online and search for a specific model of an iPad and know just really what the market value is, and then pay within a few dollars of that price. You're not going to pay too much more for an iPad. And the truth is, in drop shipping, especially if you're using retailers, your prices are always on the high side. And if you're on the high side in the electronics world, it's going to be very difficult for you to make money, because people can easily look up that same product. Whereas if they found this on eBay, it's very hard to go look up this very same product, especially if you're clever in your title and you don't use the name of the product there. You're using a bunch of generic keywords. The bottom line is, because it's price driven, and because it's brand driven, and because there really isn't a lot of wholesale drop shipping opportunities, suppliers are hard to come by. And therefore, it makes it very difficult for you guys to make much money. All of your electronics are going to be overpriced, and you're going to price yourself out of the market. There's a reason right there. Okay, that's probably one of the highest reasons. Next reason, on eBay at least, there's a high fraud rate. Meaning, if you list an expensive television, especially as a newer seller, there's a very good chance you're going to get a scammer who tries to buy it from you, and you have to end up canceling the order and relisting it. And because you're a newer seller and you're listing a consumer electronic, it attracts scammers. They think they can scam you and get away with not paying you and getting you to send out the product, which is obviously not going to happen. But there's a lot of fraud in it, and that's just headache that if you've ever dealt with that kind of headache on eBay before, it's not worth it. Okay, 6, and this is probably one of the reasons why I hate to see newer clients do a lot of electronics is it looks shady. Okay, well, I should say it looks shady to eBay. Okay, so you're a brand new account, right? You set up your account just yesterday, and then all of a sudden on day 2, you're listing a $400 PlayStation, brand new, using a stock image, and then your next picture or your next listing is of a $600 flat screen plasma TV, 4K TV or whatever, and it's like, well, that's the way a lot of scammers accounts look, and eBay might find that suspicious, and so that's one reason, especially as a newer seller, you wouldn't want to do it. And I guess to add to that from a newer seller standpoint, and I think it was Kathy a few minutes ago made this point, but it sucks up your limits very quickly because a lot of consumer electronics are very expensive. So you list 4 or 5 items and boom, your limits are sucked up, and you're sitting there hoping something sells. And if something doesn't sell, it hurts your chances of actually getting a limit increase. And so it's probably just not a good idea. I mean, in all the years that I've done coaching, I got to tell you, I mean, I don't think I've had very many clients. I've certainly had a few that have found a little niche within electronics that they've sold, and so I don't want to totally discourage you from electronics as a whole. I mean, you can find and discover your own little niche if you want to test out some. And I'm just saying, as a whole, it's not been representative of my very best clients, and it's certainly not for me been representative of my best sales as somebody making money on the internet. So I kind of want to just save you the headache. I don't want to burst your bubble, but I want to save you the headache and say, hey, maybe later, right? Maybe after you've got 6 or 7, 8 months, 9 months, a year's worth of running experience, then maybe you sign up for that marathon and you run it. But do you do it a month in? I think you're crazy if you do. I think there's other markets, and to my analogy, other races. Now, not that you can't make money in these other markets. Of course you can. There's great markets. Just because electronics is one of the most popular ones doesn't mean that's the best one. Okay. I always ask, hey, what do you want to sell? And you say, hey, something that has a lot of demand and sells a lot. Well, that represents electronics. But for these reasons right here, I think you should stop yourself and think about it and say, wait a minute, maybe I can dabble in some other markets before I do this. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? You guys kind of get where I'm coming from there? I wanted to cover this in particular, mostly because this is designed for you guys who are newer, and I wanted to give a good explanation why I say don't do electronics. A lot of times when you ask, I just say, hey, it's really competitive. I think it'd be hard. Let's not do it. Here's a longer version of why I say that. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think we'll finish up with that. There are electronics retailers out there. One that I had used in the past, and I'll just show this to you. I'm always careful about showing you suppliers because, if I know of a good supplier that a client is using, I'm not going to share that supplier on a webinar. That wouldn't be fair to them. So I like to be careful about who I do show. This is just one that I've used before. I used to use Newegg, and I would buy clearance electronics and resell them. And you could find some pretty good clearance stuff off of Newegg that was deeply discounted, and I'd turn around, I'd buy it. I would actually carry the inventory. I wouldn't drop ship it, although I have seen some of you guys drop ship off of Newegg. Again, it's newnewegg.com. This just represents one of lots of electronic suppliers out there that you could dabble with. This is a retail supplier. There are some wholesale electronics drop shippers out there. I'm never overly impressed with their pricing. So take it for what it's worth. Especially in electronics being a price-driven market, I don't think there's a lot of margin for too much profit. But you know, it's, if you're really interested in this place, you can, or in this space, you can certainly look into it. This is just one example. Okay, well, with that said, guys, I want to finish up. Glad to have you here. Excited for another year teaching you guys how to do this stuff on eBay. I hope this was helpful, and if nothing else, I hope it just saves you some time. So rather than beating your head against the electronics wall, you can be discovering niches that maybe weren't your first idea, but ended up being one of your very best, and that's been the case for me. Okay, all right, we will see you guys next week. Thanks for coming along. We'll do it again.